On August 27, 2025, in Wolfsburg, Volkswagen unveiled the second generation of the T-Roc on a quiet stage, with the spotlight squarely on it. The T-Roc is Volkswagen's compact crossover SUV, first launched in 2017 and now one of the brand's best-selling models in Europe. This new version looks sharper, broader in stance, and more mature in its design. During the reveal, Volkswagen announced that the car would be offered only with hybrid powertrains, no diesel engines and no conventional petrol engines without electrification. From the very first day of sales, every T-Roc will come with some form of electric assistance built in. The most striking part of the launch was Volkswagen's confirmation that this T-Roc could be the last brand new vehicle they develop around a combustion platform before Europe's 2035 CO2 regulation bans the sale of new petrol and diesel cars. That decision transforms what could have been an ordinary product launch into a pivotal moment in the company's history. But it gets crazier. VW isn't treating this like a sunset special. They've loaded it with the same MQB Evo bones used under pricier models like Tiguan. Think of it as the latest Lego base that lets bigger car tech filter down. You get the fancy driver assist tricks, the new driving experience control, an optional head-up display, and a cabin that finally feels premium instead of fine for the class. In plain English, they didn't just keep the T-Roc alive. They leveled it up so it can fight in today's market while everyone argues about tomorrow. You thought that was big? Try this. VW didn't stop at mild hybrid. After launch, two brand new full hybrid setups arrive. Those are the ones that can creep silently in traffic and harvest more energy when you slow down. No plug, no waiting at chargers, just better day-to-day efficiency. It's a direct answer to buyers who love the idea of electric smoothness but hate planning life around cables. And yes, the spicy bits are still coming. A 2.0-liter mild hybrid with all-wheel drive and a new T-Roc R later on. Translation: mainstream buyers get simplicity, enthusiasts still get their grin. But wait, this next part changes everything. Why make a hybrid push now, in 2025? Because the rules and the demand are messy. The EU has locked in a 100% reduction target for new car CO2 by 2035, with stepped cuts in the years before that. Car makers get some short-term relief on how those targets are averaged through 2027, but the direction of travel is obvious. At the same time, industry groups and some politicians keep calling for flexibility as EV growth zigzags and Chinese competition bites. In that chaos, a well-priced hybrid that you never have to plug in can look like sanity. It keeps VW's sales moving while the charging grid and battery costs catch up. And here's where it gets wild. This launch isn't just a product. It's the setup for a payoff. Back in 2023, VW's brand boss said the next T-Roc would be the company's final all-new combustion model for Europe. Now it's here, with pre-sales starting August 28th and a price that opens at €30,845 in Germany. So the question we're going to chase all the way through this story is simple but loaded. Is this a brilliant hedge? One last very modern ICE-based SUV to bridge the gap? Or a beautiful swan song before the fully electric T-Roc arrives later in the decade? By the end, you'll know whether this car is a stopgap or a blueprint. Rewind the clock to 2017. The SUV craze is in full swing, but not everyone wants a hulking three-row monster that hogs space and drinks fuel. Buyers in Europe, especially younger ones, want something different, compact enough for tight city streets, but still styled like the big adventurous rigs they see in ads. Volkswagen spots the opening and rolls out the first-generation T-Roc. It's small, sharp-edged, almost coupe-like in profile, and carries the VW badge that, at the time, still meant solid German engineering at a price you could just about stretch to. And here's where it gets wild. Within months of its launch, the T-Roc isn't just filling a niche, it's exploding into one of VW's fastest-selling SUVs, second only to the Tiguan. In fact, by 2024, VW moves almost 292,000 T-Rocs in a single year. A staggering number when you consider this is technically a compact crossover, not even a flagship. But let me tell you this. The world around that first T-Roc changed almost overnight. Between 2017 and 2023, The EV wave hit Europe like a freight train. Governments piled on subsidies. Cities started talking bans on combustion engines. Tesla turned into a global symbol. BYD came charging out of China. And suddenly, every headline screamed that the future is electric. VW, under enormous pressure from the Dieselgate scandal fallout, doubled down on electrification, pouring tens of billions into its ID family of EVs. And yet, through all of that noise, the T-Roc kept quietly climbing the sales charts, becoming what insiders called the silent moneymaker. It was the proof that, even as people posted about EVs on Twitter, they were still walking into dealerships and signing for petrol crossovers. But wait, this next part changes everything. By 2023, the EU locks in its big rule, a 100% reduction in CO2 from new cars by 2035. Translation: no new pure gasoline or diesel cars after that date, except for a narrow loophole using synthetic e-fuels. Every automaker scrambles. Some brands announce they'll go fully electric earlier. VW makes its own bold move. It announces that the next generation T-Roc, yes, the very car we're talking about, will be the last brand new combustion model it ever develops for Europe. Not a facelift, not a variant, the last clean sheet I see. That's a statement. It's basically saying, we'll give our best-selling SUV one more life, then the gates close. You thought that was big? Try this. The timing wasn't just political, it was personal for VW. Their EV rollout had hit turbulence, software delays, slow adoption of the ID.3 and ID.4, and rising competition from Chinese brands. They couldn't afford to ditch their cash cows too early. So the T-Roc became a lifeline, one more generation of big sales to keep factories humming and profits flowing while the company fought to get its EV program right. In other words, the new T-Roc isn't just a car launch, it's VW buying itself breathing room. So by the time the second-gen T-Roc arrives in 2025, it carries a double identity. On the surface, it's the fresh update of a proven hit designed to keep buyers happy. Underneath, it's also a farewell letter to an entire era of combustion at Volkswagen. And that's why this story gets more dramatic the deeper we go, because every feature, every engine choice, every design tweak is part of VW's high-stakes balancing act between the world that was and the world they say is coming. Now, let's walk around the brand new second-generation T-Roc, because this is where you see just how seriously Volkswagen took what could have been a routine last hurrah. They could have phoned it in. Mild facelift, slap a hybrid badge on it, call it a day. But instead, they rebuilt it with the same toolkit they gave to the bigger, more expensive Tiguan. And here's where it gets wild. The T-Roc now rides on the MQB Evo platform, the latest evolution of VW's modular architecture. That means it gets tech and refinement usually reserved for cars a class above. In car terms, it's like a mid-tier phone suddenly running the flagship's chip. First, the numbers. The T-Roc has grown 122mm longer and 28mm added to the wheelbase. Doesn't sound huge on paper, right? But think of it this way. That's basically the difference between feeling cramped in the back seat and finally being able to stretch your knees out on a road trip. And the boot? It's now up to 475 liters. For perspective, that's about 100 liters more than what you'd get in a Toyota CHR. Enough room for another full suitcase or a big week's worth of groceries. You thought the first T-Roc was practical? This one edges toward family car territory while still staying compact enough for city streets. But wait, this next part changes everything. The exterior isn't just bigger, it's bolder. The front wears a wide new grille, flanked by IQ.Light Matrix LED headlights, the same lighting tech you'd find on VW's more premium models. And for the first time, you can spec the VW logo itself illuminated at the front and back, tied together by a full-width light bar. Translation: at night, this thing glows like it's straight out of a sci-fi movie, giving off a premium vibe without needing a premium badge. From the side, the more muscular creases and redesigned alloy wheels add some swagger, while at the rear, the updated LED tail lamps make sure you don't mistake it for the old model. Inside, Volkswagen finally listened to the critics. The old T-Roc's cabin was solid but dull, full of hard plastics that felt more economy than premium. The new one flips the script. You step in and the dash is fabric-clad. The materials are softer and the design is cleaner. Front and center, a larger infotainment touchscreen, smoother and faster to use, paired with a fully digital driver's display. For the first time, you can even tick the box for a head-up display, projecting speed and navigation right onto the windscreen. And here's a clever touch. There's now a driving experience switch, a physical dial that lets you toggle between modes with a satisfying click. It's small, but it's tactile in a way that makes the whole car feel more expensive. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Comfort isn't just about materials, it's about space and vibe. VW's stretched wheelbase means rear passengers finally get a fair deal. This isn't just a youthful crossover anymore, it's a car you can actually take on long family drives without complaints. The seats are redesigned for better support, and yes, there's ambient lighting baked in, which turns nighttime drives into something far more relaxing. And if you care about sustainability, here's the hook. The T-Roc now uses around 20% recycled plastics, about 40 kilograms in every car. That may not sound like much, but it's part of VW's push to hit CO2 targets even while still selling combustion vehicles. Think of it as squeezing every efficiency possible out of the last combustion chapter. So what's the takeaway? Volkswagen didn't treat the second-gen T-Roc like a farewell model. They treated it like a reset button. It's sharper, more spacious, more premium, and more sustainable, which tells you something crucial. VW isn't trying to coast on past glory here. They're betting that even as the EV conversation dominates, a well-designed hybrid crossover with top-shelf tech can still turn heads, and more importantly, move hundreds of thousands of units. Because for VW, this isn't just about keeping the T-Roc alive. It's about keeping their entire European strategy on life support until the EVs are truly ready to carry the load. Alright, let's pop the hood, literally, and talk about what Volkswagen actually put into the second-generation T-Roc. Because this is where the story shifts from design to guts, and it's not just a bunch of spec sheet numbers. It's VW trying to balance two worlds at once, the fading era of pure combustion and the messy, not yet ready future of full EVs. First things first, every single T-Roc you can buy from launch comes with hybridization as standard. No bare-bones petrols, no diesels. The entry point is a 1.5-liter ETSI engine. That's VW's shorthand for a turbocharged petrol four-cylinder paired with a 48-volt mild hybrid system. Now, what does that actually mean? In plain English, the engine gets a little electric sidekick. It can't drive the car on its own, but it smooths out stop-start traffic, adds a little torque when you accelerate, and recycles energy every time you brake. Think of it like giving your petrol engine an electric coffee shot. It's not a new drink, but it wakes it up. There are two power versions of this mild hybrid, one with 116 horsepower and one with 150 horsepower. Both are tied to VW's 7-speed DSG automatic gearbox. And here's where it gets wild. The DSG is a dual clutch system, which means the car has the next gear preloaded before you even shift. The result? Gear changes so fast and smooth that the average driver barely notices them. It's one of V's party tricks, and it's why their small cars often feel more premium to drive than the competition. But wait, this next part changes everything. VW didn't stop at mild hybrid. Coming just after launch, they're rolling out two brand new full hybrid drivetrains. These aren't plug-ins. You won't ever have to hunt down a charging station. Instead, they behave more like Toyota's hybrid setups. At low speeds or light throttle, the electric motor can move the car all by itself. Then, when you need more, the petrol engine kicks in seamlessly. The benefit? Dramatically better efficiency in city driving without adding the complexity and cost of plugging in. VW is betting this will close the gap for customers who want EV-style smoothness but aren't ready to live life on the charging cord. And if you thought that was the end of the story, try this. Volkswagen has already confirmed that more muscle is coming. A 2.0-liter mild hybrid with 4 MOTION all-wheel drive will join the lineup, giving buyers who live in snowier regions or who just want more grip a real option. And then, of course, there's the T-Roc R, the performance flagship. No exact numbers yet, but expect it to land north of 300 horsepower, keeping the enthusiasts smiling while the accountants count hybrid sales. So, what's the bottom line? VW's powertrain strategy for the T-Roc is like a buffet with 3 lanes. Mild hybrid for efficiency and affordability. Full hybrid for people who want EV-like behavior without charging stress. And performance versions for the loyalists who still want to hear a Turbo 4 scream. It's not one size fits all. It's VW hedging every bet, making sure there's a T-Roc for every type of buyer at a time when nobody's sure what the market will look like in 5 years. And here's the kicker. This spread of engines might be the real secret to why VW thinks this car can still dominate. Because while rivals are either all in on EV or stuck on older combustion tech, the T-Roc straddles the middle. And in 2025, that middle is exactly where the most buyers are still standing. Now let's zoom out from the engine bay and look at the chessboard Volkswagen is really playing on, because this part is just as much about geography and psychology as it is about horsepower. The T-Roc isn't aimed at every market, and that's what makes its positioning fascinating. First, let's clear something up. You won't see the new T-Roc in the US market. Americans still lean heavily toward bigger SUVs and trucks, and VW already has the Taos and Tiguan there. But in Europe, the T-Roc is gold. Compact crossovers fit the roads, the parking spaces, the fuel prices, the lifestyle. And here's where it gets wild. The T-Roc has quietly become VW's second best-selling SUV after the Tiguan, moving close to 292,000 units in 2024 alone. That's not small potatoes. That's volume that rivals would kill for. For context, Mazda sold about 180,000 CX-30s worldwide in the same year. VW's playing in a league above when it comes to this segment's dominance. But wait, this next part changes everything. The rivals the T-Roc faces now aren't just other gasoline crossovers. They're hybrids and EVs that are already carving out space. Think of the Toyota CHR with its well-proven hybrid system, the Mazda CX-30, a style-first contender, the Kia Niro and Hyundai Kona, both of which come as hybrids, plug-ins, and pure EVs. And then there's the Mini Countryman, which leans on premium branding. That's the T-Roc's battlefield. Some rivals chasing value, some chasing tech, some chasing prestige. VW's answer: be the one that blends all 3: German build quality, modern tech, and now hybrid drivetrains as standard. And here's a detail that makes or breaks this whole strategy: price. In Germany, the second-gen T-Roc opens at around €30,845. That's about £26,000 in the UK, or roughly $33,000 converted. Compare that to EV rivals. A Hyundai Kona Electric typically starts around £33,000 to £35,000, while a Kia Niro EV stretches closer to £37,000 to £42,000. That's the gap VW is sliding into. They're saying, want something modern, electrified, and premium, but don't want to pay EV money or deal with chargers. Here's your lane. But let me tell you this: in Asia, the story plays differently. In China, VW still has brand strength, and compact SUVs are booming, so the T-Roc can carve out space, especially as hybrids are seen as a smoother step up from petrol. In India, though, price sensitivity is brutal. Hyundai, Kia, MG, they all undercut VW with more features at lower prices. That means the T-Roc will stay a niche, aspirational buy there, rather than a mass hit. And here's where it gets even more interesting. In Europe, VW's gamble is really about holding on to mainstream buyers who are curious about EVs but not committed. These are families and commuters who might balk at charging queues or the higher sticker price of an ID.4. For them, the T-Roc hybrid offers a familiar experience wrapped in new tech. It's the automotive equivalent of saying, "Don't worry, you don't have to change your life yet." So, what's the takeaway? The T-Roc isn't just another compact SUV, it's Volkswagen's pressure valve. It's not in America because it doesn't need to be. It's designed to dominate Europe, to hold ground in China, to skim niche sales in India. And the whole strategy pivots on value. Pitch it just under EV rivals, but with enough tech and polish that it feels like a smart buy, not a compromise. In other words, VW is using the T-Roc to keep the middle of the market locked down while the future of EV adoption is still shaky. Because if they can own that middle ground, they can buy themselves time and a lot of revenue before the next leap. Now here's the part that really pulls the curtain back on Volkswagen's strategy. Because the T-Roc isn't just about selling another crossover, it's about how VW is threading the needle between what's profitable today and what's inevitable tomorrow. Let me tell you this. Volkswagen has already admitted the T-Roc is their last brand new combustion model for Europe. That's not a rumor, that's a direct statement from VW's own leadership back in 2023, which means this car is walking a tightrope. On one side, the EU's 2035 zero CO2 rule, which says no new petrol or diesel sales unless you're running on rare e-fuels. On the other side, the cold, hard reality that EV adoption hasn't gone as smoothly as politicians predicted. Charging infrastructure is patchy, software costs are high, and Chinese rivals like BYD are undercutting everyone with cheaper, well-built EVs. VW needed a plan that kept them afloat in the middle of that storm. And the new T-Roc is that plan. But wait, this next part changes everything. VW isn't saying, forget EVs. In fact, they're doubling down on EVs with their next-generation SSP platform, which will underpin a fully electric T-Roc later in the decade. SSP is supposed to be VW's holy grail, one software-driven platform for everything from small cars to flagships. But SSP is late, and late in this game means losing ground to Tesla, Hyundai, and the flood of Chinese brands. So what do you do while you're buying time? You launch a hybrid T-Roc that prints money, keeps customers in your ecosystem, and bridges the gap until SSP finally arrives. And here's where it gets wild. By making hybrid the standard, VW isn't just hedging, they're reframing the story. Instead of being seen as clinging to combustion, they can claim to be easing the transition for buyers. It's marketing judo. Families who aren't ready for an ID.4 but don't want to feel outdated with a plain petrol can now buy a T-Roc and say, hey, I'm driving a hybrid too. And for VW, that's priceless, because every T-Roc sold is another year of cash flow they can funnel into EV development. You thought that was big? Try this. VW's EV lineup. The ID.3, ID.4, ID.7 hasn't caught fire with buyers the way they hoped. Sales are steady, but not explosive, and critics have hammered the buggy software. The T-Roc, by contrast, is a sure thing. It's proven, it's profitable, it's popular. So VW is effectively saying, let's lean on the T-Roc to stabilize the brand while we sort out the messy EV rollout. And because the new model has that MQB Evo tech and recycled materials, VW can also tick the sustainability and innovation boxes without overpromising. So what's the big picture? The T-Roc hybrid strategy is less about the car itself and more about time management. VW knows where the finish line is. Full electrification. But they also know the road there is bumpy and expensive. So they're using this car as a bridge, one that locks down Europe's most competitive segment, buys time for SSP to arrive, and keeps customers loyal in the meantime. And here's the suspense we'll carry forward. When that electric T-Roc finally launches, will buyers actually make the leap? Or will this hybrid generation be remembered as VW's cleverest hedge, or their last gasp before getting overtaken? So now we've reached the final act, the moment where all of this buildup comes together. The second-generation T-Roc isn't just a car launch, it's a test case. A test of whether hybrids can hold the line long enough for Volkswagen to get its EV house in order. And let me tell you this, the stakes couldn't be higher. You thought the flashy lights and new platform were the story. Try this. The real drama is what happens after launch. Because three things will decide whether this car goes down as a masterstroke or a farewell tour. First, real-world efficiency. VW is promising that the upcoming full hybrid system will deliver much bigger gains than the mild hybrids, closer to Toyota Prius territory. That means stop-and-go driving with the engine off, quiet creeping in traffic, and a claimed approximately 15% improvement in fuel consumption. If it works, buyers who were skeptical about EVs might say, this is enough for me. But if it under-delivers, Toyota, Hyundai, and Kia will keep winning hybrid buyers by default. Second, Pricing and spec mix. In Germany, the car starts at just over 30,800 euros. That undercuts many EV crossovers by several thousand euros. But here's the catch. Volkswagen has to strike a balance between keeping margins healthy and not pricing themselves out of the value conversation in places like Spain, Italy, and especially Asia. In India, where Hyundai and Kia offer loaded SUVs for much less, the T-Roc risks being seen as a premium toy. In Europe, though, that pricing could be the sweet spot. Cheaper than an EV, nicer than a budget SUV. If VW nails that perception, the car sells itself. If they don't, buyers will simply stretch a little further and go electric anyway. Third, the enthusiast factor. Sounds small, but it matters. The T-Roc R and the 2.0-liter A mild hybrid aren't just niche trims. They're signals. They tell buyers VW isn't abandoning performance, isn't giving up on choice. Because once the EV-only era kicks in, that flexibility disappears. If the T-Roc can keep the fun crowd happy while delivering hybrids to the masses, it casts a longer shadow than just another compact crossover. But wait, this next part changes everything. Because looming in the background is the fully electric T-Roc on the SSP platform, due later this decade. That's the finish line. That's where VW has to prove it can finally match Tesla, Hyundai, and BYD, not just on paper, but in sales. The hybrid T-Roc's job isn't just to sell well now, it's to keep customers from wandering off before that EV arrives. And here's the wildest twist. If the T-Roc hybrid sells strongly enough, it could actually slow down EV adoption in the short term. People who might have bought an ID.4 could grab a hybrid T-Roc instead, reasoning that it's cheaper, simpler, and more familiar. That's the paradox VW has to live with. Success here could delay their own EV revolution, but failure could cripple them before they even reach the EV endgame. So, what's the payoff to the question we asked at the very start? Is this the last glorious stand of the gasoline era or a clever bridge to the future? The answer is both. The new T-Roc is a reminder that the internal combustion engine still has some fight left, especially when paired with clever hybrid tech. But it's also VW's last roll of the dice before the rules change forever. And that's what makes this car so fascinating. It isn't just a crossover, it's a clock. Every sale is another tick-tock, buying Volkswagen time until the EV version arrives. The only question is, when the clock runs out, will VW be ready? Or will this hybrid generation be remembered not as the bridge, but as the final chapter?